In 2005, CBC Radio-Canada learned that it would be subject to the Access to Information Act. The corporation was granted exemptions to the Act for information related to journalistic, creative, and programming activities, as had other international public broadcasters, like the BBC. But most other details about the corporation's business were to fall under the Act. CBC Radio-Canada had 2 years to prepare for information requests and became subject to the Act on September 1st, 2007. That's when reality hit.
Well, we did some fairly extensive due diligence with other federal institutions that had been subject to the Act for a while. So we asked them how many requests they were getting and how they were staffed for it. We also consulted our brethren at the BBC, because they also have their own version of the statute and they have their own experience with it. And based on that, based on our relative size, we came up with what we thought was appropriate staffing and resources to deal with the coming into force of the statute.
This is a story about CBC Radio-Canada's successful transition towards greater accessibility, transparency, and accountability to Canadians. About moving from a failing mark from the Information Commissioner of Canada to meeting challenges head-on and succeeding. In the first 2 months under the Act, CBC Radio-Canada received 10 times the number of information requests originally expected. Clearly, the corporation had misunderstood the demand. Requests piled up. There were delays and formal complaints. The Information Commissioner awarded CBC Radio-Canada an F rating. The corporation appeared before the Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics, and was the subject of debate in the House of Commons. At this point, CBC Radio-Canada's senior executives realized that the corporation needed to take an entirely different bend in the road. They saw 2 opportunities: improved capacity to process ATI requests and increased transparency by providing easier access to information about the corporation. This required a major shift. The corporation had to educate and engage its employees about the importance of responding to Canadians. It also had to balance the need to comply with the law while safeguarding the public broadcaster's independence. Put simply, the laws governing the corporation's operations were pitting one public good, accountability and transparency, against another public good, an independent, credible national public broadcaster that could protect its journalistic sources.
CBC News has learned.
The corporation also needed to protect its ability to compete commercially, since the government had determined that CBC Radio-Canada must raise revenues in addition to receiving federal appropriations. So, how did the corporation make the necessary cultural shift?
I think the leadership had to come from the top, so from the president and CEO through the senior executive team all the way down to the rest of the management teams. Everybody had to be aligned in the direction that the president was giving to the organization.
With new commitment and tools and training, CBC Radio-Canada began to fully meet its responsibilities under the Act. But it didn't stop there.
The ATI file was all about doing the right thing and continuing to do the right thing. At CBC Radio-Canada, we're very proud of our transparency and our accountability. And this was about sharing with Canadians information about our operations, proactively disclosing on a revamped website information that we thought would be of interest to them, and making the experience friendly and simple.
With these changes, traffic to CBC Radio-Canada's corporate website increased exponentially. Then, in December 2012, the Information Commissioner of Canada made an important announcement.
The CBC transformed its access to information operations in the last 2 years to receive an A grade for 2011-2012.
Moving from an F to an A grade was very welcome news. To receive that A had involved several steps: understanding Canadians' expectations, resolving to properly respond to them, and figuring out how to do it. From there on, the corporation began to proactively post information such as quarterly financial reports and an augmented annual financial report providing more information about finances and progress against objectives in the corporation's strategic plan. And a new website was created to inform Canadians about CBC Radio Canada's public value contributions. While the A grade was important in its own right, it also signaled change and rethinking on a number of fronts at CBC Radio Canada.
The most important thing was the culture shift, as we went from simply answering questions under a piece of legislation to inviting Canadians to ask questions about us, sharing information with them so that they could actually know more about CBC Radio Canada.